An absolute bombshell report from the New York Times yesterday. By the way, New York Times and Washington Post sort of in a contest of doing real journalism all of a sudden. I think we can all appreciate that. The New York Times reported yesterday that Donald Trump, in that infamous February meeting with now fired FBI Director James Comey, asked James Comey to end the FBI's investigation into disgraced National Security Advisor Michael Flynn and the Russia scandal. We've learned about this because of a memo that James Comey wrote after the meeting. Donald Trump reportedly said, quote, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He's a good guy. I hope you can let this go." To which James Comey reportedly responded with only, "I agree he is a good guy," opting not to talk about ending the investigation at Donald Trump's request. This is the president expressing a total disregard for the independence of the Justice Department. This is what dictators do. This is at face value obstruction of justice. When you look around the world at dictatorships and repressive regimes and anti-democratic states, there is no independent press. There is no judicial independence. There's no independence of the Justice Department, the equivalent to the Justice Department in those countries. This is the president saying, don't do that investigation. What does the president know about when an investigation should start or end? That is for the FBI to determine. This is taking a stand against separation of powers. And even Jason Chaffetz, Pat, Republican, who seems hesitant to investigate anything that involves a Republican, had to concede that, yes, this might be a concern, saying, quote, "This would raise questions as to whether the president attempted to influence or impede being the key word, the FBI." Is there a red line we haven't yet crossed here?
Well, I think there's still reason to be skeptical because there wasn't a third person in that room. It was just Trump and Comey.
Fair enough.
So it's kind of like you have to choose the word between one or the other. The problem is, Trump specifically, his credibility has been questioned so much at this point.
Yes, it has.
Whereas Comey, his credibility isn't so much questioned and the veracity of his claims are never questioned.
In fact,
maybe his judgment a little bit too much.
Much of what James Comey has said has ultimately been confirmed to be true. And again, this is the meeting, as Pat says, this was a meeting between Donald Trump and James Comey. It took place the day after Michael Flynn resigned. And this is clearly, if true, all part of Trump trying to just cover up the Russia stuff. Tell Flynn to resign, tell Comey to stop investigating, it'll all go away. Obviously, the White House has denied James Comey's version of events in that memo. We are now trying to figure out whether that memo will be subpoenaed. And the White House is sort of trying to frame Comey as seeking revenge because Trump fired him. I went on Drudge Report yesterday, and they had some headline like, "Comey starts revenge," or something along those lines. Again, the memo was written months ago, unless you believe that the memo has since been fabricated. The memo was written months ago, and I guess you'd have to believe anticipating eventually being fired. Back in February, James Comey wrote a fake memo that he could later talk about or something like that. I mean, again, it starts to become very complex to go down that path.
It's very hard to explain. And also, are we just to believe that Trump is so concerned with the well-being of Michael Flynn? I mean, they've only known each other for a year or two. You'd have to think that if there is a smoking gun when it comes to this Russia investigation, it's via Michael Flynn, and he's kind of showing his hand here.
And as far as the notes specifically and the credibility aspect that Pat was talking about, it's important to know that in court, an FBI agent's notes are basically held as credible evidence of conversations. There's no assumption that the case notes made by an FBI agent are of sort of questionable accuracy when you're talking about these in the context of a court proceeding. And that's really important to know when we just say, well, hey, listen, it's one person's word against another person's word. What is in the memo, generally speaking, would be considered credible evidence in a court situation. And that actually is important to know.
Interesting, yeah. And if there was going to be a third person in the room, it would have been Jeff Sessions, the attorney general, who is actually James Comey's boss. But I think Trump wanted to make sure that it was just them two in the room, and you can see why.
Interestingly, Jeff Sessions said he would be recusing himself from everything related to Trump Russia. Of course, he was the guy that initially we found out recommended the firing of James Comey, who was the guy leading the investigation into Russia. Not exactly the type of recusal that you would imagine would be taking place, is it?
Well, he is the top lawyer in the country who also perjured himself.
Yes, he did. Trump thinks that this is sort of like a business situation, right? He's working a deal. Hey, let me get Jimmy in here and I'm going to tell him to just cut the investigation out, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about a criminal investigation here by the FBI at the highest level. And Donald Trump apparently saw no problem with and had no shame about trying to meddle with that. We are quickly moving in the direction of crossing some more red lines. I don't know what red lines remain. Like, I guess maybe Trump personally killing someone, right? I mean, he said I could kill someone on Fifth Avenue and nothing would happen. We're quickly getting to that being the only red line that hasn't yet been crossed, if it would even be one.
Yeah, you'd have to imagine there's some plausible deniability, but if these things just keep adding up, it gets to a point where you're getting conspiratorial to deny them.
Yeah, you would have to believe a far-reaching conspiracy to believe that there's nothing to see here. I think that's a really good point.